Good afternoon, everyone. We are still waiting for Angel GURRIA. He's on his way from another panel to this one. But I will probably start my introduction if the organizers allow me to do so. Is this okay? In 2015, the international community adopted the Agenda 2030, probably the most ambitious global commitment ever made to address the challenges of economic, social, and environmental sustainability on this planet. I think I see Mr. GURRIA coming. Yeah. Yes. Okay, if you allow me, I will start it again. In 2015, the international community adopted the Agenda 2030, probably the most ambitious goal commitment ever made to address the challenges of economic, social, and environmental sustainability on this planet. Governments, business, employers and workers, organizations, civil society, research, and international organizations need to work collaboratively to put this commitment into action. Children and victims of forced labor and trafficking are among those at risk of being left behind. There are 152 million children who need to contribute to household incomes rather than benefiting from education and leisure. At least 40 million people are trapped into different forms of modern slavery, including trafficking, forced labor, debt bondage, and sexual exploitation. The tragic death of 39 migrants in a container in the UK reminds us of the vulnerability of people that are looking for a job and a better future outside their home countries. While the world is a much better place today than 50 or 100 years ago, inequalities are widening and pose a challenge to peaceful and democratic societies. People feel they are not equally benefiting from trade, technology, and globalization, fueling nationalist and populist sentiments. The answer is that we need to build more inclusive economies and address the needs of the most vulnerable. This afternoon, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorable guests, with whom we want to discuss how different partners can collaborate in the Alliance 8.7 to address the exploitation of children and workers in child labor and forced labor. As you may know, Alliance 8.7 is named after the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal number 8 for inclusive growth. And the target number 7 of this SDG addresses eradication of child and forced labor all over the world. I would first like to give the floor to EVELYN CHUMBOW. We are very pleased to have you with us. You are a former victim of trafficking and today a law professional and an activist committed to fight forced labor. EVELYN, can you tell us your story and describe what it means to be exploited and what can be done to prevent people from being trapped into the networks of traffickers?
Thank you. All right. If I talk too fast, please excuse me. I talk real fast. Again, my name is EVELYN CHUMBOW. I am a survivor activist for anti-human trafficking / modern-day slavery. I usually like to explain my story again, originally from Cameroon, precisely Bamenda, the English part. And for me, back in Cameroon, I used to watch a lot of television shows. So I got influenced by The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I don't care what anybody say, Bill Cosby. You know, you might have your reasons, but I always wanted to have a father like Bill Cosby. And a lot of those television shows influenced my reason for wanting to go to the United States. So I was living with my uncle, and it is sad to say, but never in a million years did I think that my uncle sold me into slavery. And never once did I think that I'll become a victim of modern-day slavery, knowing that slavery ended in the United States 1865. I never thought that I would go to the United States and become a survivor of child labor trafficking. So again, like I said, my dream was to go marry Will Smith, if he's listening, and have Bill Cosby as a father. But that dream was not what I expected when I got to the United States at age 9. So again, when you hear of the issues of modern-day slavery or trafficking, I got on the plane, you know, and I first landed. I never met my trafficker. My trafficker is also Cameroonian, and I never once met her. I met her the first time in the UK, in London. So. And again, with the whole immigration issue back in the United States, never once did I think that I came to the US illegally, but I did go to the US illegally, you know, and my trafficker used one passport and brought 6 of us in the United States. And I arrived in the UK thinking that that was America. Now I know the difference. Okay, so I met my trafficker there in the airport, and from the UK, we went all the way to the United States, precisely Maryland, Silver Spring, Maryland. I stayed in my trafficker house from age 9 until 17, did not go to school from age 9 until 17, was cooking and cleaning and taking care of 2 kids. I was physically and mentally abused. I have scars, and one of my punishment, I had to take off my clothes, and I was getting beaten because I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know how to clean. Again, in Cameroon, I was going to school. You know, I went to school, but I came to the United States. The education that was promised was taken away. So no school from age 9 to 17. I ran away. I went to a local church. When I shared my story at that church, it was a Catholic church, and from there, you had law enforcement in the U.S., NGOs, folks that work in these type of issues, and I just shared my story like I'm sharing with you now. And my case is one of the first in the United States to ever be investigated all the way back to Maryland. All the way back to Cameroon. And I testify. We have what is called a T visa, and that's what I got. All the time I was, in the U.S. Again, most of the time people think that folks that are forced labor or working as domestic servitude, they don't get sexually exploited. I was sexually, exploited, but I just don't share that because it was something that was horrible. But beside that, I survived. I went to school, got my high school diploma, got my college degree. I work in one of the biggest law firms, Baker McKenzie Law Firm. I'm also on Advisory Board for Free the Slave, the Homeland Philanthropy, and I'm an activist. I share my story. In 2015, President Obama nominated 11 of us to serve on the White House Council, and I was one of those 11. I keep fighting about this issue because it's a serious issue that exists, especially as a young child, that it happened to me. I talk too much. Thanks.
Many thanks, Evelyn, for your statement and your personal insights. If you want to be effective in the fight against child labor and forced labor, one important aspect we should look at is appropriate legislation. The ILO Conventions on Child Labor and Forced Labor, the Palermo Protocol on Trafficking in Persons, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child are important instruments to protect people from labor and sexual exploitation. I welcome the Labor Minister of France, Madame PENICAUD, to this panel France, as the host country of the Paris Peace Forum, has made important efforts to promote a multilateral cooperation framework based on international conventions and human rights standards. Minister PENICAUD, what is needed to translate the global legal architecture into national legislation? Where are the challenges? Where are the gaps? And what can be done about it?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Louis CHUMBOW because you put the meaning of what we are doing all together. It's exactly because we don't want any more child being in your situation, any more adult to be in forced labor. And I think it's very important that you start to give the tune because it's the reason why we are all here. So how to make it, it's difficult still today in early 2020 years. There are still 150 million of kids who are working in the world and 50 million people in forced labor, as far as we know. But it's at the dimension of that. It's incredibly shocking. And I think it's not only a terrible burden for them. I think it's like something that destroys the heart of society in all countries. And when we are at the ILO, with Oecd or IMF, we're speaking especially in ILO, but with the other organization, of how we can combine the future of social, environmental, and economic, how we can combine the future of the planet and the future of work, how we can use the social dialogue. As far we have not eradicated child labor and forced labor, we are not enough strong to make it happen and to make the whole sense of that. So it's very important. So what are our strategy? First, with our President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, we are extremely convinced that is related to the multilateral agenda. It can look very far, but in fact, to be efficient, we need first to work at the international level, but then to have all the dimension, because there is an economic issue in that. Why people force children and labor? Just for money. I mean, it's not like a few sadism also, a few sadic people, but so we have to embrace a whole approach, and we are fully convinced that the consistency in multilateralism is a key to social progress and economic progress. It's why in the International Labour Conference last June, this topic was so high, organized by the ILO. It's why in the G7, President Macron put the question of multilateralism very high, and in this why, in the G7 social that I have handled in Paris with my colleagues of the 7 countries, we have decided to do 2 things. First, to work on this level to especially this dimension of forced labor and children labor, but also we have done for the first time in the G7 history a tripartite agreement with the G7 country and the employers and employees representative at the global level. And that's very important because we can succeed only if we join force. And it's why we are, I think today, which is very important, that the Alliance 8.7, I like that its objective is called an alliance, because it's the only way to succeed is to put together governments, social partners, NGOs, academics, influencers, all partners that can contribute to this topic. And sometimes we work too much in silos, and we have to work together to succeed. So to eradicate child labor and forced labor, I think our first time is running, but we have to speak about the methodology. Methodology means we have to be very flexible, very determined, but also we need to rely the global agenda and the national agenda. And I think something very important, and that the previous presidency of the Alliance was handled by Australia and vice president by Argentina, as I would like to congratulate them for what they have done. Now France is taking the baton. But it's to have this mix of flexibility and determination. What it means? It means that at the country level we can do a lot. We need to support the 15th Pathfinder countries that are on the edge of this fight, and that needs support. Financial support, we do our part, but also alliance of actors part. And it's the reason why France, we have decided to work to seek pathfinder status too. Not that we don't, as you can imagine, child labor, I think, doesn't exist in France. Forced labor is supposed not to exist, and modern slavery is supposed not to exist. You will always find a few cases where it's not big case, but a few cases. So as you have mentioned, in US, it's unexpected, it does exist. So it means it can exist everywhere. That's the first reason. But the second reason is even more important. We cannot say it's a question of some countries. No, it's a global agenda. And we're all in charge. Why? Because, for instance, for the forced labor or child labor, the question of the supply chain is key. What means supply chain? It's been some global company have 2, 3, 4 level of subcontractors, and at the end of the chain, we don't know, they don't control social relations and work conditions very often. And I think it's part of the responsibility of our countries and of the global company to contribute to support the country who are at the edge of the battle but cannot do it alone. And I see 2 levels. One is what the Prime Minister of Sweden has started with the Global Deal. Global Deal is an alliance of unions and employers and government to have global social agreements, to make some progress on the social dialogue at the global level. It started in Sweden, now it's supported by Oecd and by ILO, and we work as a team, I would say, on that. And President Macron asked 1 year and 2 years ago now France to join, and now we have joined, and we have a very active club of 35 global companies, all global, that are all everywhere in the world, in 100 countries. So it means they are also, by their subsidiaries, by their contractors, by their clients, or they are in the country where this question is very high. So I think it's a good way also to contribute to move everywhere. And the other way we can do something is that we have some local legislation that can help. In France, since 2 years, we have an act in the law for the duty of diligence. What it means that multinational company based in France have a responsibility on fundamental social rights and environmental impact everywhere they are in the world. They have to report on that, saying we are at risk on that, or we don't know, or we want to change that. It's not easy. I've been 20 years an executive in a global company. I know you don't know a lot of things, but you have to organize yourself to know. It's not easy. It's not something one company alone can do. It's not something one government alone can do. But working on that, we can change the playing field for of the business on that. And today we have more than 100 multinational companies that engage in this démarche, in this approach in France. And it's interesting because they can help each other from a ethology standpoint to see how we can make that also with code of conduct, were a good way to make big company accountable. So I would just like to finish on that to open the debate. I think it's not a little topic. It's a huge topic. And if we are not able to eradicate child labor and forced labor, how can we build the future of the work? How can we build the future of our world? We are not even to protect first the freedom of the children to go to school and to have health and to have freedom. So this topic is very important in our multilateral agenda. That's why we are so happy to take the lead of presidency. Presidency means being at the service of all the other partners. We know we need to work together, and I'm very keen to listen now my colleagues to see how we can make some progress on that. Just a word, of course, we need to measure progress because it's the only way to progress, but we are very committed to support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Pennicaud. I just take stock of what you said about the fact that we must put our efforts all together taking advantage of our diversity as actors to go and to address the same challenge. And also all the tools you put on the table, legislation, social bargaining, voluntary commitments, all this to address a very daunting commitment, and time is short because we have put these SDGs in a specific calendar, and we should just be able to show progress till 2025 for child labor and 2030 for forced labor. Guy Ryder, the DG of the ILO, towards the end of the World War II, the ILO reaffirmed its constitutional principles in the Declaration of Philadelphia, stating that poverty anywhere constitutes a danger to prosperity everywhere, and that all human beings, irrespective of race, creed, or sex, have the right to pursue both their material well-being and their spiritual development in conditions of freedom and dignity, of economic security, and equal opportunity. These noble principles are still valid, but have not materialized for many people yet. What needs to be done, to your opinion, to create inclusive economies as a foundation for peace and social justice?
Well, ANOUSHEH, thank you very much. Yes, that Philadelphia Declaration from 1944 still rings very beautifully in our ears. It's a great declaration of the world of work and the world we'd all like to live in. But the fact of the matter is that we're really a very long way away for too many people from that reality. And Evelyn, your story is so powerful. I think we all have to just stop for a moment and think, for your one story, there are 25 million other stories of victims of forced labor, 40 million victims of modern slavery in the world, and 152 million stories from child laborers around the world. I mean, you just have to try to put the human story behind these statistics. And it is, I find, somewhat bewildering and shocking that 100 years after at least the International Labour Organization was founded, with a very clear mandate and commitment to put an end to these types of human rights abuses at work, we still have a very, very considerable task ahead of us. And we have to, I think, look back, see what we have done and have been able to achieve, and there have been major achievements in these areas as in others, but then use that experience to think, well, what more has to be done as we move forward to get to these time-bound targets. And ANOUSHEH, you made this point. We're committed to end child labour by 2025 and forced labour and modern slavery by 2030. And the bad news is, on the current trajectory, we're not going to make it, and it's no use pretending otherwise, unless we change and accelerate what we're doing. And that's where Alliance 8.7 comes in. Alliance 8.7 today is an alliance of over 200 actors, of governments, of enterprises and business organizations, of trade unions, of civil society actors, of international organizations, the OECD and the ILO amongst them, which have come together to react to this very harsh and shocking reality of the forced labor and child labor, which is still with us in the world. As we see it, the task of the Alliance is above all to provoke, generate and accelerate action to put an end to child labor and forced labor, and to that end, to generate and share knowledge, because unless you know the nature of the problem, you're unlikely to find the right solutions to curing the problem. And there's an important report being published today, which Angel, I think you're going to speak to in a moment. I won't steal his thunder. It's not a good thing to do with Mr. GURRIA. And then to marshal resources and efforts so that we do have the firepower needed on the scale commensurate with the size of the problem. Now, if you look at the realities in which the type of coercion and deception which leads to forced labor and child labor occurs, I think you can sort of look at three sort of areas of intervention. One is we still do not have, despite the international instruments which have been referred to and which are very well ratified around the world, they're accepted by governments as legal obligations. We still have major gaps in legislation and enforcement. The fact of the matter is, if it was just as easy as passing a law or a prohibition in 1865 in the United States or wherever else, our problem wouldn't be what it really is. But we have genuine gaps in enforcement. Think of my own country. I'm from the UK. A Modern Slavery Act in 2014. A Modern Slavery Act in 2014. The ILO itself had to adopt a new protocol on forced labour the same year. So we still have to work on legislation and enforcement mechanisms. Secondly, we know that there are factors in labour markets in society that render people more vulnerable to falling victims to child labour and forced labour and modern slavery. They have, of course, to do with poverty. They have to do with absence of social protection. They have to do with the absence of educational opportunity, access to quality education. And we have to work on the, I think, systemic causes of vulnerability. And the third element, I think, comes, and we'll hear about it in a moment, I think, from business behaviour. And the behaviour along global supply chains, which Muriel, you have referred to, where I think the whole business and human rights agenda needs to come and be a part of everything that we're doing. So Alliance 8.7 is working in these areas. We're delighted that France has taken over the presidency following the excellent work done under the Australian and Argentinian presidencies. We look forward, Minister, to working strongly with you to take the alliance further forward. We've established action groups in different areas. We've focused on global supply chain and global supply chain management. Angel will have something to say about global supply chains in a moment, I think. We're working on migration questions, and we're looking at further areas of focus which we think are particularly appropriate to taking the struggle forward. We have, and we're very, very pleased that this is the case, 15 governments which have volunteered as pathfinder countries, countries which have volunteered to take a lead and to intensify and accelerate their own efforts to eliminate forced labour and child labour. And I think this is really important, from grounding an international alliance, grounding it in national experience and national action. I think if we can't make that link, sometimes we have great conversations in Paris or New York or Geneva, but that doesn't always translate easily enough into action on the ground. So what I'm encouraged by when the challenges are enormous is that the international community really has mobilized by including these issues in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, by picking up these issues in the G20 under the French G7 presidency. There's no question here of closing our eyes to these issues, as perhaps, or regarding them as invisible issues which we can't get to. And I think that this acceptance of responsibility, the demonstration of leadership, for example, by the government of France, and I hope, Angel, the capacity of international organizations to get out of their silos and work together in support of what is being done gives us, I hope, greater hope to get to those time-bound targets that we've set for 2025 and 2030. And have no illusions, if we don't make it, we should acknowledge the failure. There is nothing inevitable about these circumstances, nothing which says that children should have to go to work or people should be trapped into forced labour. It is a failure of our societies, it's a failure of the actors of the world of work, it's a failure of political will, and we shouldn't let that happen.
Thank you very much, Director General. I really pick up two key words from your speech. The first one is one of the last words you pronounced about responsibility. I think we are all responsible of the failure and also the success of the challenges we are facing, and that is why the French presidency and chairing the alliance has total determination for this success. We are aware, and you said it, dear Guy, it is an unfinished business. International organizations have their part, governments, but also businesses. Before I give the floor to a business representative, I would like to take the opportunity et donner la parole à Monsieur le secrétaire général du ministère des Mines de la RDC, Monsieur Joseph IKOLI YOMBO Yapeke, qui représente pour nous le ministre des Mines de la République démocratique du Congo, qui n'a pas pu faire le voyage. La parole est à vous, Monsieur le secrétaire général, pour nous dire aujourd'hui comment votre pays, qui est un des principaux producteurs du cobalt et d'autres minerais qui sont vitaux pour les énergies propres, les solutions d'énergie propre et dans les télécommunications, comment votre gouvernement répond à ce défi de production de ces minerais sans le travail des enfants, sans faire appel au travail forcé pour effectivement extraire cet or du XXIe siècle qui est le cobalt. Number 2. 10, sorry. 10. C'est à vous, Monsieur le secrétaire général. Vous pouvez parler. Merci, Gilles.
Merci. Le thème est très important. Le thème est d'une actualité brûlante. L'accès au patrimoine mondial. La culture doit être universelle, également participative. Les amis, mes prédécesseurs ont parlé des musées en Europe. Je crois qu'il y a un problème important pour nous, Africains, c'est la réparation d'une injustice. Les œuvres d'esprit que vous parlez, les œuvres d'esprit que vous avez entreposées dans vos musées, il y a également le patrimoine culturel de l'Afrique qui a été aussi pris sans le consentement des Africains. Il faudrait donc, à mon humble avis, réparer cette injustice. Il faudrait également que la démarche ou le processus qui ont été entrepris par certains pays africains puissent aboutir, en d'autres termes, le retour de certaines œuvres qui ont été prises en Afrique pour qu'ils puissent remplir aussi nos musées. Dans les musées, nous en avons besoin, et ici en Europe, et également en Afrique. Et nous voulons que nos musées soient d'abord remplis de nos œuvres d'esprit, soient d'abord remplis des œuvres que nous avons nous-mêmes tissées, parce que ça porte l'esprit, la culture de nos peuples. Donc, je voudrais seulement dire...
On va passer au sujet de la table ronde. Nous avons bien pris note de votre demande. Est-ce que nous pourrons parler maintenant du travail des enfants et du travail forcé? Merci beaucoup.
Oui, parce que j'avais suivi un peu le problème de musée, c'est pourquoi je voulais quand même répondre. Bon, s'agissant du travail des enfants dans notre pays, particulièrement dans le secteur de mines, c'est une réalité, c'est une évidence. Dans la mesure où, lorsqu'on a pu libéraliser le secteur minier en 1982, toutes les personnes de tout âge se sont ruées dans le secteur minier, les adultes comme les enfants. Dans la mesure où il y a eu un problème, c'est la pauvreté, la précarité de conditions socio-économiques des parents. C'est ainsi que et les enfants, malheureusement, sont devenus exploitants artisanaux. Et il faudrait également, pour ce fléau, prendre 2 périodes. La période avant la publication du rapport d'Amnesty International et l'ONG AfriWatch en janvier 2016. Et pendant cette période, il y a eu quand même la volonté politique de lutter contre le travail des enfants dans notre pays. Notamment en 2011, il y a un comité national de lutte contre les pires formes de travail a été mis en place. Donc, il y a cette volonté déjà avant la publication du rapport d'Amnesty International. Il y a eu bien sûr quelques textes légaux et réglementaires qui ont été pris également par les différents dirigeants des différents ministères sectoriels. Mais il s'est fait que le Comité national de lutte contre les pires formes de travail des enfants avait un vaste champ d'action. Il n'a pas pu, disons, arriver à atteindre les objectifs qui ont été assignés. Et on a ouvert une brèche, c'est qu'il y ait de stratégies nationales sectorielles de lutte contre le travail des enfants. Et le ministère des Mines a dû prendre en main la situation après la publication du rapport d'Amnesty International. Le ministère des Mines a d'abord élaboré, avec le concours de toutes les parties prenantes, une stratégie nationale sectorielle de lutte contre le travail des enfants. Il fallait passer à la deuxième étape, c'est l'élaboration du plan opérationnel, bien sûr, de cette stratégie nationale, qui devra être pilotée ou mis en œuvre par une commission interministérielle de lutte contre le travail des enfants, ce qui a été mis également vers décembre 2011. Donc, nous avons élaboré une stratégie nationale sectorielle de 2017 à 2025. Parce que nous pensons que nous allons tout mettre en œuvre pour éradiquer ce fléau à l'horizon 2025. La stratégie nationale, bien sûr, a plusieurs axes, au moins 6 axes, disons, stratégiques. Mais l'un des axes les plus importants, comme nous sommes ici, c'est la mise en place ou la constitution d'un fonds spécial tolérance zéro à l'horizon 2025. Ici, il y aura bien sûr l'apport du gouvernement congolais, mais également, ce que nous souhaitons, c'est l'apport aussi des organismes régionaux et internationaux comme BIT, OIT, Alliance 87 et d'autres organismes. Parce que nous estimons que le défi majeur, ce n'est pas seulement de retirer les enfants dans les mines artisanales, mais le défi majeur, ce sont des solutions alternatives et durables. Et ces solutions doivent être soutenues par des moyens financiers techniques, des moyens financiers conséquents, des moyens techniques et un accompagnement administratif. À ce jour, nous avons quelques projets pilotes qui ont été déjà mis en œuvre avec le concours des partenaires. Je pourrais citer le projet Codeco avec BIT, OIT, financé par le gouvernement américain. Nous avons, et ce projet est plus axé sur le renforcement des capacités de membres de la commission interministérielle. Il y a également le projet Papaya Corbat avec la Banque africaine de développement. Et ce projet vise à soutenir les solutions alternatives plus en faveur des parents. Comme j'avais dit, le problème important qui est à la base du travail des enfants, c'est la pauvreté des parents. C'est la précarité des conditions de vie des parents. Et là, ce projet vise à renforcer les moyens des parents, à diversifier les activités des parents, non seulement dans les mines, mais aussi au niveau de l'agriculture, la pêche, l'élevage, etc. Et l'une des solutions durables, c'est le retour des enfants dans les écoles. Parce que la place des enfants n'est pas dans les mines artisanales, parce que je crois l'OIT, dans une de ses résolutions, dans ses conventions, estime que le travail des mines, c'est un travail dangereux. Et parmi les solutions actuelles, au niveau du gouvernement de la République démocratique du Congo, le président de la République venait de prendre une mesure importante. Il n'y a pas 6 mois, c'est la gratuité de l'enseignement de base dans notre pays. Nous pensons que c'est déjà l'une des premières solutions qui permettrait également aux parents aujourd'hui d'envoyer, même dans les zones minières, leurs enfants à l'école, parce que le prétexte de la pauvreté, le prétexte de manque de moyens pour financer les études de leurs enfants au niveau de l'enseignement de base, ce prétexte-là va être éliminé. Il y a également le problème, bien sûr, de la restauration de l'autorité de l'État dans les zones minières. Parce qu'il faudrait faire respecter les dispositions, par exemple, du code minier, du code de la famille, du code du travail, parce qu'aucun de texte légal ou réglementaire dans notre pays favorise le travail des enfants. Mais tous ces textes légaux et réglementaires interdisent le travail des enfants. Donc, il faudrait que nous puissions faire respecter ces dispositions dans un climat de paix. Donc, nous avons des projets pour résoudre ce problème. Les textes légaux et réglementaires ont été pris. Des projets pilotes sont en marche, mais il faudrait que désormais des actions soient des actions concertées, des actions coordonnées à travers la commission interministérielle de lutte contre le travail des enfants. Et il faudrait également aussi que nous puissions avoir l'accompagnement des partenaires, parce que les moyens financiers font également défaut. Voilà l'appel que je peux lancer, c'est que vous puissiez nous accompagner pour que les objectifs que nous sommes assignés d'éradiquer ce fléau d'ici 2025 soient atteints avec le concours de toutes les parties prenantes au niveau du pays et avec le concours des organismes et des partenaires internationaux. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur IKOLI. Vous avez mis le doigt sur des problèmes importants. D'une part, le fait que l'objectif de développement durable, croissance inclusive et sa cible numéro 7, l'éradication du travail des enfants et du travail forcé, a une interconnexion importante avec d'autres objectifs de développement durable, l'éradication de la pauvreté, mais aussi l'accès à l'éducation. Vous avez mis l'accent dessus. Vous avez aussi montré comment dans votre pays, ces sujets, la question de l'éradication du travail des enfants touche des sujets connexes comme la restauration de l'autorité de l'État via le code minier. Et enfin, évidemment, l'Alliance 8.7, qui est un partenariat global, est ici pour rapprocher les pays partenaires et les pays pionniers pour que tous puissions avancer avec des moyens conséquents sur ces sujets-là. Je donne immédiatement la parole à M. Gilles VERMOT-DESROCHES de la société Schneider Electric. Vous allez parler en français, Gilles?
I don't know. No, in English.
In English, okay. Your company is one of the Fortune Global 500 companies focusing on the digital transformation of energy management and automation in more than 100 countries. Social, environmental, and ethical responsibility for upstream supply has been one of your key initiatives, including looking into minerals tracking. With complex and wide-ranging customer and supplier relations, on which Minister PENICAUD stressed too, how do you ensure that your products and services are environmentally sustainable, but also free from child labor and forced labor? And in general, what business can do for that?
Thank you. After these 4 pitches, I have a question. And the question is, how dare we I would like to use this word because on Climate Week we use How Dare You with Greta words. And now it exists a big momentum about climate and the fact that we have to change. But when we are speaking about climate change, for a long time, we know this situation. It was not true for climate. But about climate change, we know that about child labor, forced labor, we know that for a long time. How dare we? Because we know. And now we have to act. Perhaps three topics from a company. I'm the representative of a company. I can explain what we are doing in the reality and how this question is hard to manage in a company. First, Alliance for Aid and to Progress. Alliance is key because if we are alone to be responsible, to have our own vision, to in our dashboard or sustainability is not enough. If we are able to build together a big alliance, we can change the things. We can adjust. We can have a new momentum about this topic, and I think it's interesting. It's interesting for a second reason. It's a question of data. When we know, when we have the data, the situation is not very different. But with the data, we can measure. With the measurement, we can embark people who say, oh, yes, perhaps it's true, perhaps it's not true, it's your vision, you have some example, but it's not enough. Okay, it's very hard to have this data, but it's key to progress. It's key to know if what we are doing, it's in the right direction or in the opposite direction. And thanks for that, because with this alliance, we will be able to have this data and we will be able to manage a momentum with many different actors. In Schneider Electric, 2/3 of our turnover, it's transferred to suppliers. 50,000 suppliers in a direct line, and after that, the suppliers of the supplier of the suppliers. I would like to dream with you to be able to audit all the suppliers and the suppliers of the suppliers. But in 1 year, perhaps in 5 years, it's not possible. What are we doing about this question? The first thing, we make sensitive all our suppliers about Global Compact. You know, Global Compact is something designed by Kofi Annan 20 years ago, and the two first principles of Global Compacts are about human rights, and the two after are about child labor and these topics. And with that, we open dialogue discussion with our suppliers, and we organize something in public manner, not only in the relationship between Schneider and suppliers and between us, we can discuss of that. When we are speaking about Global Compact, we ask the people to sign, the chairman of the company to sign to a United Nations site about this topic and to say, oh, you know, in my company, never. And for me, it's important. The second thing, we have audit for 300 targeted suppliers each year with external people, targeted because the country, targeted because the activity, and we try to progress and to change the reality with this supplier. That is the first topic. Thank you for the alliance. We have to progress about this topic and contribute to eradication of these realities. The second thing, and I reinforce what you say, it's a question of dark. We need, especially companies, to contribute to train people. We need, especially companies in my business, to contribute to provide access to electricity for everybody. 1.3 billion people don't have access to electricity. I'm sure many of the people who are in child labor are in the dark each evening. And dark is not good to open the mind, to provide the future. Then my company, two other goals, have a goals to train 1 million people before 2025, people at the bottom of the pyramid to contribute to their own future, but because we train to electricity, to organize the prosperity of the community. And the second commitment is to have the right solution for access to electricity. In the last 3 years, we provide access to electricity for 50 million people. It's nothing. 1.4 billion people don't have access to electricity. 50 million, it's just the beginning to to show that it's possible that with training and with a new solution, with renewable and so, we can change the reality. And when the people will be in a new reality, especially the family, we are in the prevent. We make the reality that it's not in this world that the children are able to have to go. And as well. Last but not least, just one thing. We have 1 billion of teenagers today. It's the first time at the worldwide level. 1 billion of teenagers. If you have an historical view about innovation, it's only in the mind of the young adult that we have the biggest innovations to change the reality of the world. We need to unblock the world. We need to rebuild a new world with the manner to have the vision differently. When we don't train people, we lose the possibility of that. In France, we have something, c'est Mozart qu'on assassine. It's Mozart that we kill. Each time that we don't train a child, the world is in the place of the losers. We are all losers because if we train this guy, perhaps we have the innovation for the new world that we need to have in less than 10 years because climate, because biodiversity, and because these topics that we have to eradicate.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Last but not least, Secretary General Angel Gurria. Can you tell us a little bit about all the OECD has developed guidelines for multinational enterprises to foster ethical business behavior on employment, industrial relations, human rights, environment, etc. The OECD also works with their member countries on the governance of inclusive economies and the design and the implementation of trade policies. How can you, as a partner of the Alliance 8.7, tell us to translate into all these policies into benefits for the majority of the people and provide them with access to decent work, but also decent life, as Gilles Desmond-Roche just told me about, decent life and decent work, both together.
Thank you. Guy and I were in the G20, and suddenly Theresa May came up with this initiative about combating slavery. And, everybody was talking about the economy and the recovery and the banks and suddenly she came up with this question of slavery. And we had just been in India. And in India, I had actually walked with Kailash Satyarthi down the main street, in the main this corridor in the parliament, with President Mukherjee at the time, which started what they called the march for 100 million for 100 million. They tried to get $100 million in order to help 100 million children, 100 of the 150 that are in child labor. And this is when it's probably easier to get together 15,000 or 20,000 people in Delhi than it is in other capitals in the world. But we walked down the street. We felt so proud. We felt so strong that we were doing something meaningful. And so when Theresa May, fast forward a few days later, proposed this child slavery and adult slavery and child labor and forced labor, and then, of course, even abused, both children and adults. It comes to life. And it was interesting because I have to say, we did not pick it up like a big central theme of the G20 or the G7. It was put kind of in the back burner, and it shows you also a little bit about, you know, we react to the more immediate, we react to the more urgent, to the more pressing. But these, which hundreds of millions of people around the world, was not picked up as something evident. And I tell this story because that means we have to get back and do a little bit of homework on some of the fundamentals. Now, we have had now for 50 years the multinational enterprise guidelines at the OECD. We've been updating and upgrading them, you know, every 3, 4, 5 years. We do another review and we update them and we upgrade them. And the responsible business conduct. We even created the national contact points together with Guy and national contact points are, where do you go and complain? So, I mean, you see, what do you call? Who do you call when you have evidence that something is very wrong? And we created these national contact points, so you could call, either because a company is doing something, you know, or because the government is allowing for something, or because there's a law that is discriminatory, or simply because of budgetary reasons, or because of competence, or because of skills. Governments are not in a position to actually, you know, penalize and actually criminalize, and then of course pursue, and eventually you're just to punish the people who do this. Now, a number of elements were mentioned, and I'd like to say first, because this is indeed, together, the ILO, the OECD, the International Office of Migration, this is the UN migration now, because now it's a UN body, and UNICEF. We did this ending child labor, forced labor, and human trafficking in global supply chains. Again, as Muriel said, it's about the economy. It's about the money, you know. So I suppose that Agatha Christie, you know, you say you follow the money, you know, and you get to the guy who did it. Here the question is, it's a money issue, because the child labor and the forced labor and the adult labor, slavery in slavery conditions, is about the global supply chains in order to be competitive. And then, of course, we buy it here from the big brands, and we don't know. Now, I remember after Rana Plaza, this disastrous situation when the building collapsed on top of, you know, 1,000, 200, 1,300, mostly women who were working on the textile in Bangladesh. That day, the minister of, a few days later, the minister of Bangladesh came in to explain what they were doing in order to avoid this. And that day, one representative of a big country came in and said, we come here to announce that we are banning Bangladesh for continuing to export because of the you know, the Rana Plaza, and because of child labor, etc. And here you have the situation. On the one hand, you would say, good, they're stopping the bondage. They're stopping, you know, they're penalizing the country. And at the same time, they are penalizing the country. And therefore, they are blocking the exports, and they're, you know, eliminating a lot of bona fide jobs, and at the same time, they are basically eliminating the livelihood of many of these countries. So it's a problem of balance. But when in doubt, I would say, you know, go for sanctioning, go for penalizing, go for punishing child labor anytime. Now, this is a combination of governments, because there is a question of regulations, because there's a question of, I would say most of the regulations are in very good shape. It's mostly the enforcement that in many cases, in most cases we have blatant examples that fails. And then corruption, collusion, the authorities sometimes with the ones who are doing the trafficking. And then again, yesterday we were at the OECD with the Business for Inclusive Growth. You were there. And 40 countries were getting together to make sure those 40 countries, upwards of 3 million employees and upwards of 1 trillion in sales. They were saying, how can we make sure that we, as pioneers of this effort, are going to set the example in order for every single country in the world, for every single company in the world to respect inclusive growth, to practice inclusive growth, to aim for inclusive growth, to promote inclusive growth, to make sure that there's a compliance officer inside the company that says that, yes, you are delivering an inclusive growth. They made a pledge, and they did it the day before the G7 in Biarritz, in the Élysée, with President Macron as an example. And Muriel was organizing the whole thing. And then they created, this pledge about the behavior. Then, and they say, we will respect human rights. This is the first pledge. The second is creating an incubator. And the third is the financing of these good practices. So I'd say, let's stick with it. Let's stay with it. I invite you to focus on, this is very simple. Somebody said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. This measures it and then suggests a number of recommendations about policy in order to pursue this very, very important, worthwhile objective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. We can also applaud the ILO, the OECD, UN Migration, and Unicef for this very important report about child labor, forced labor, human trafficking in the realm of global supply chains. If I may give the floor 1 minute to my minister to tell us what can we go back home with? What is your idea about what you heard and what we can do?
Listening to our debate, my feeling is clear we are all horrified. There's a lot of things done, but now we need solutions, concrete solutions. And I think we could use the Alliance 8.7 with the support of ILO, OCD, UN Migration, UNICEF, everything was in the excellent report, and all your support, to go very far on benchmarking, well, which are the best solutions. Because if it was easy, it would have been done before, okay? We know that. So where are the best in class of company with a supply chain at the second, third level? What have they done? Which are the countries where at the edge of combining fighting poverty, raising the school right, and fighting against child labor? What are the NGOs and how they create the awareness and feeling for victims that they can not alone, they can be debated, but concrete solution, benchmark, putting the best solution around the table to support the energy of one to another, because we have the global things we have done. It's done. What we should do in general, we know, but now we go for action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. One last word.
One last word. So again, the minister said it. You need collaboration. You need unity. I really believe that unity is the key to end this situation. But I will also say that a lot of times, as a survivor activist, it is very difficult. I've been in panels, talk about a lot of things that are being done, and really, I don't see it being done. You understand? And, you know, you can talk, but we need the action. And a lot of times, when we get out of the situation, we go back to the situation because, again, modern day slavery is big money. And a lot of the time, survivors, they get out of the situation, but they end up being re-victimized because they don't have job opportunity. You know, earlier they said something about training. A lot of the times, we survivors, we train businesses, organizations to be aware of this issue. It's a big issue, it's a serious issue, and affects you. I would say that in my case, as a child, that's something that has stuck to me, raising a child. It's not something to just talk about, and you come and you listen and you just walk away. It's something that you really have to pay attention. Like, this is the 21st century, and you're still talking about slavery, and children are being affected. It has affected me a great deal. Please don't just listen, do the action, and we need more funding in the movement to end modern day slavery. It doesn't make sense. You know, these are human beings being sold, but they're not, you know, there's not a lot of funding for it. So please don't just listen, do something and make the action, because children, like they said earlier, are not supposed to be in slavery. They're supposed to get an education. And you can feel sorry for the story that you've heard about me, but I don't want you to feel sorry. I want you to take action by funding and by letting survivors speak out more. That way you learn about the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. It is very important to hear you talking about taking action. So I don't see the organizers. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions from the floor. Nobody reacts, so we can do it. Here. Pas de micro? The micro is coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very interesting panel. So I've got 2 questions on my side.
Can you present yourself?
Yes. So my name is Marie Fromager, and I'm working in an asset manager. So I'm engaging with companies who are investing on the social front. So I'm very interested in this thematic. So my first question is about concrete solutions, because, and I very liked your comments, Evelyn and Madame PENICAUD. We need concrete solutions. And I was just wondering, so we have some laws in France, in the UK, in Australia, about the duty of care, the Modern Slavery Act. And as you said, from Schneider, you are able to trace back to your tier 1 supplier, but then it's getting more and more complicated for suppliers beyond tier 1. So I was wondering if you are considering using the blockchain to really get some traceability from the very start of where the commodities come from. And the second question, and sorry for my ignorance, I was wondering if you have some levels of tolerance when you are speaking about child labor, because in some countries, as you mentioned, like kids are also very important for families to have an income. And in some contexts, I think I heard that kids can still work like 1 or 2 hours a day and still go to school. So do you have different definitions of what is child labor depending on the country? Because if you want to eradicate child labor in 2025, you have to eradicate extreme poverty. It seems very ambitious, so perhaps you have different definitions and intermediate steps. Thank you.
A second question? No question? Okay. No question. I've said no time, sorry. And there were 2 questions, so you can answer to the 2 questions you were asked. Gilles?
It's a very hard topic. Just about the last of your, the end of your question, and certainly you can it's a definition of child. Perhaps when we are speaking about teenager, in fact we have that in France. When in France we are speaking about apprenticeship, it's more or less something organized for that. We have teenagers in France that are not able to go at school, and they have to have money because for the family. So I think we don't have time, but it's a question of the age of the child. Before 10 o'clock, before 10, sorry. My vision 12 on 14. I think it's impossible to speak about labor for the discussion. The second thing about my company, when I speak about audit, yes, today it's in the first line, but for many reasons, in different parts of our supplies, we have audit for level 2, level 3, because we can see the risk. Today, not with blockchain, but in an old manner, I can say that, and certainly we have to innovate to embrace more suppliers in this discussion, but it's certainly the future of our discussion. For today, we have the commitment for the first line. I expressed 15,000 suppliers in some exception, because we know the risk. We are able to have audit in the level 1, 2, or 3.
Thank you.
Maybe two things on that. First, I think responsibility of companies can go with reputation, and we must use reputation too. Your responsibility and reputation. Second, I think it's exactly why I say we need a concrete solution with benchmark between companies. In the Global Deal Club, we see people speak of that. And they speak of the difficulty they have for second tier, third tier, which kind of solution, concrete solution to do it. And I think we have to be practical on that. How you can do it when it's thousands and thousands and thousands of suppliers. Some companies have found ways on that. And we need to learn from that. It can be very concrete. And I think it's why we need this kind of benchmark between companies on that. On the child aid, I think it's Guy to answer.
Maybe Joseph, puis Guy.
Merci. J'ai aimé la deuxième partie de la question de Madame, quand il demandait la définition d'abord de l'enfant, ensuite qu'est-ce qui se passe. C'est pourquoi nous avons toujours dit et soutenu qu'il faudrait de la flexibilité dans l'examen de cette question. Lorsque les ONG publient, d'autres organismes, ils ne tiennent pas compte de toutes les données socio-culturelles, les données techniques, mais il faudrait nécessairement, comme l'un d'entre nous venait de dire, que les enfants peuvent aussi aider leur famille pour compléter leurs revenus et aller à l'école. Mais lorsqu'on est vraiment dans une position extrême, cela pose aussi un problème dans nos pays africains, comme je l'ai dit, où il y a des problèmes de pauvreté, des problèmes de précarité de la vie. Donc, dans l'examen de cette question, nous demandons qu'on puisse être flexible pour définir ce qu'on entend par le travail des enfants.
Guy
ensuite,
Ryder, s'il vous plaît. On va passer la parole parce qu'il nous reste très peu de temps. Guy, could you tell us about international conventions about that?
I think we have the answer on this one. There are international labour standards, Convention 138 on minimum age for employment, Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labour, and they are flexible instruments. They give different minimum ages for different circumstances, but they are explicit, clear, and objective. So those standards contain the types of flexibilities that you're maybe referring to, but there is no room for flexibility in the application of those standards. They are international law. The flexibility is within the standards, but we cannot tolerate, I would suggest, any flexibility in their application. And I would refer you to the conventions concerned. I think you'll find the answers there. If I've got 30 seconds, just on supply chain management and monitoring, you know, we're all we're all grappling with this notion of due diligence. Companies are required to undertake due diligence in the management of their supply chains, business and human rights. I think we're all in the process of working out what that due diligence actually requires. Should it be legislated? And you have given examples of legislative action in respect of due diligence. Modern Slavery Act is an example. That's one side of it. And then you have the realities of, how many tiers down the supply chain is it reasonable to ask a company to exercise monitoring? And when I speak to business, I get very different answers from different companies. Blockchain is one thing. Google satellite imagery is another one that companies are using to monitor supply chains right down to the last tier. And the last point, we've talked about auditing of supply chains. Can I just leave you with a disturbing thought? Rana Plaza was audited. That factory was audited by multiple mechanisms, and 1,100 people died in that factory because those audits were useless. So we have to think carefully.
Just very briefly, if I may, just a thought.
2 words.
Yesterday, some of the big enterprises that committed for best practices said, we have traced the supply chain in terms of the textile, which is the most typically mentioned case, all the way to the cotton, all the way to the production of cotton. So it is possible.
Thank you very much. It is possible.